I'm Kate.
I'm Archit.
I'm Mega.
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Halal.
And we're Team
A.
Here today to talk to you about the science behind
Spider-Woman.
Let's jump right into it.
Jessica's power derived from her mother's womb being hit by a laser beam containing the genetic sequences of various spiders while she's pregnant. The laser beam would have to carry some type of advanced technology that inserts genetic information into the DNA of Jessica's cells from the external environment. It would have to have the ability to code for new and different functions of each cell. Theoretically, it is possible. However, currently, the only common and still very rare form of genetic alteration for humans is the direct manipulation of the genome using molecular engineering techniques. Germline genetic modification would change the genes in eggs, sperm, or early embryos. These alterations would appear in every cell of the person who developed from that gamete or embryo, and also in all subsequent generations. Again, Jessica's genetic alteration would be from a laser beam, so I don't know. Animal genetic modifying in combination has already been done. There are genetically modified goats at the Utah State University, which produce large quantities of spider silk that is among the strongest substance known to man. The transplanted gene means the goats produce milk containing an extra protein, which is extracted and spun into spider silk thread. Regarding humans, recently Japan authorized human-animal embryo experiments. It is still very early to make any definite conclusions, but it has been determined that the more evolutionary distant the animals from the human, the process fails much earlier on. Therefore, gene splicing with a spider would be completely incompatible, and it is very likely that the experiment would fail very early on. Jessica also has the ability to elicit pheromones, which are found attractive to the other gender and sometimes even other females. Human pheromones are still being researched. There is no strong direct evidence supporting the idea that pheromones or any chemical cues produced by the human body elicit strong behavioral reactions in other people. Animals detect pheromones most commonly with their vomeronasal organ, which humans do not have. The strongest evidence is related to a woman's menstrual cycle being affected when they smell the sweat of other women. However, spider pheromones are proven to be real, and female spiders do release pheromones via air or silk that attract males. Again, this release of pheromones would have to be coded into her DNA via the spider power giving laser beam. Other people would also have to be able to detect these pheromones. So, this ability is still a bit up in the air. Would released pheromones have such a strong effect as to seduce somebody? Probably not.
On the chemistry side of things, Spider-Woman possesses a venom blast that comic strips show would be capable of throwing and stunning a supernatural being 4 times the size of her. Is this really possible, though? To start, we investigated the molecular compounds of traditional spider venom and what enables it to cause harm. There are 2 different kinds of spider venom: necrotic, which damages and kills the skin, and neurotoxic, which attacks the nervous system and is much more serious and fatal. Both are made up of the same 3 compounds. The average spider venom is made up of low-weight molecular compounds, peptides, and protein enzymes. One of the low-weight compounds are amines, made up of nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen, which cause irritation and pain. A second are acylpolyamines, also made up of nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen, which can paralyze victims by blocking ion channels to the brain. The peptides present in spider venom are linear and disulfuric, and they serve as a more severe agent of toxicity and necrosis, meaning they contribute to the death of the cells that the venom infiltrates. They are the most toxic component of spider venom. The proteins and enzymes present in Spider-Woman serve the purpose of carrying and spreading the venom around the affected area. However, the more serious components of spider venom can only be enacted once it enters the bloodstream and therefore needs a puncture wound, normally in the form of a spider bite, to enter the body. When exposed only to the outer layers of the skin, the toxicity of spider venom can only cause minor pain and isolated necrosis of the skin. Now, as we turn our attention back to the comic, as you can see, Spider-Woman hits the villain with a large amount of venom, which throws him and then appears to stun and paralyze him as he can't get back up. As the venom only hits his skin and is not delivered into his bloodstream, the venom must be necrotic and not neurotoxic, which would have been the type that resulted in paralysis. The most damage her venom blast can cause is minor pain and the start of the skin necrosis process. Therefore, Spider-Woman's venom blast is not nearly as powerful as depicted, and the villain would not react in this way to the reception of the venom only to his skin. The more powerful aspect of the blast is in the force behind it and not the composition of the actual venom.
It is unclear at this point if there are any plans for a Spider-Woman movie, or even which studio claims the right to her character. However, were Spider-Woman to be given a movie, this is how it would be created using VFX technology. There is somewhat of a fundamental process that movie makers follow when creating live-action movies with VFX. It involves conceptualization, a lot of planning, collaboration between departments, and the use of modeling and animation software. First, after the movie hires a VFX company and chooses their software, the VFX team storyboards the film, which helps later in principal photography and filming. Next, the modeling department creates 3D models of characters and objects with wireframes, which are comprised of hundreds to millions of polygons. Since Spider-Woman's suit is spandex, the studio would probably not need a 3D model of her character, but for other films like Iron Man and Hulk, VFX teams have been tasked with creating hyper-realistic character models. At the same time, the art department starts to paint the backgrounds for select scenes using mostly digital tools. Around this time, the actual filming begins. While the VFX team is not involved in filming, some members may take pictures or film separately to get the proportions and textures of props or characters. Finally, the VFX team receives the movie footage and we move to post-production. In this stage, all the VFX software is put to use. First, programmers map out camera and object movement so that the 3D rendered objects and backgrounds move correctly. This is called scene prep, and it also includes rotoscoping or color keying, which is where animators remove colors like green or blue, or entire objects from frames to be replaced. Some examples of how scene prep would be needed in a Spider-Woman movie would be her gliding and wall crawling ability. To create an effect of her gliding through the air, the actress in the background could be filmed separately. Then her character could be rotoscoped and added to the background at a higher frame rate. To create the wall crawling illusion, she could be filmed crawling against an entirely green background and placed on the digitally created building. While this happens, other animators are working on the 3D models and adding moving joints in a process called rigging. After a model is rigged and tested, animators can start to create the 3D visuals, adjusting the models frame by frame. Recently, animators have involved some machine learning software in this process, using tools that guess what the next frame will look like based on the existing frames. Animators use this AI while working on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This software is slowly getting better, but still requires corrections every now and then. After animation, there are still several steps left. The effects department has to add all the big effects like explosions and storms, and the little ones like lens flares and smoke. Another more computer science heavy department, the crowds department, uses software to create big crowds that are sometimes present in the background of fight scenes. If you think about the final battle scene of Black Panther or Avengers Endgame, there are a lot of people running around in the background. Usually these people are either digital models programmed to move like humans, or they are extras that are rotoscoped into the back. Then, the texturing department works on making the 3D models as realistic as possible, and the lighting team creates the natural and synthetic light sources for each model so that it fits into the scene. Finally, during compositing, all the VFX is added into the footage, and the film moves to sound and final adjustments. While animation is typically categorized as an art, there is a lot of computer science involved. Before any of the VFX work can begin, programmers have to create the software and tools for all the steps in this lengthy process.
Now let's talk about the physics of Spider-Woman, or more specifically the forces of stress and tension to determine the strength of her webs. The truck has an initial momentum of 0 since the truck starts from rest. After the webs stop it from falling, there are two forces being applied on the truck: the downward gravitational force and the upward force from the web. Since it also takes some time for the web to stretch, the truck is not immediately stopped. All materials stretch a little bit. To make this easier, we'll say that the stopping time is 1 second long. The momentum principle looks the same as it does before, except the two forces on the truck and the momentum is 0. So our force is still going to be 39,200 newtons.
Spider-Woman's increased strength and speed can be explained by her increased metabolism. The muscle has an origin and an insertion. At the end of each muscle belly, it attaches to a tendon, which therefore attaches to a bone. There are 3 kinds of muscles. We have the cardiac muscle, the skeletal muscle, and the smooth muscles. There are also 3 different kinds of body types. We have ectomorphs, endomorphs, and mesomorphs. Jessica's body type closely resembles an ectomorph because of her very fast metabolism.
Spider-Woman has to go through something called muscle hypertrophy, which is the act of an increase and growth of muscle cells. This is usually through lifting weights or working out. And every time you stretch and contract a muscle, every stretch tears a muscle. Every contraction creates more blood flow to that certain muscle. So over time, as you tear the muscle over and over again, it'll have to repair itself through cellular respiration. And over time, it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger.